Think of the one type of person you can't stand. The arrogant one, the fake one, the selfish one, the person who, the moment they walk into a room, makes something tighten in your chest. Now, here's an uncomfortable idea. The thing you hate most in other people might be pointing directly at the truest, most hidden thing about yourself. This isn't an insult. It's one of the most important discoveries in all of psychology. Carl Jung spent his life mapping the human mind, and he found that each of us is quietly carrying a second self, a hidden version made of everything we've refused to look at. He called it the shadow. And the strange part is this: the shadow doesn't stay hidden. It leaks out. It shapes who you're drawn to, who you can't stand, why you suddenly overreact, and why you sometimes do things that don't even feel like you. Most people go their whole lives never meeting this part of themselves and pay for it without ever knowing why. By the end of this video, you'll see your own shadow clearly, where it came from, how it's been running you, and what Jung said you can actually do about it. Because the goal was never to be a perfect person, it was to be a whole one. Let's start with what the shadow really means, because the word sounds more dramatic than the truth. In Jung's psychology, the shadow is the part of the unconscious mind that holds everything we've rejected about ourselves. The traits we were taught were bad, the feelings we learn to hide, the impulses we don't want to admit we have, anger, envy, selfishness, desire. But here's what most people get wrong. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply the part of you that you've pushed into the dark. Not because it's necessarily bad, but because somewhere along the way you decided it was unacceptable. And Jung observed something chilling about this. He said, the less the shadow is acknowledged in a person's conscious life, the darker and denser it becomes. In other words, the more you deny a part of yourself exists, the more power it quietly gains over you. Think of it like a room in your house you've decided never to enter. You lock the door, you tell yourself there's nothing in there, but the room doesn't disappear. The longer it stays locked, the more it fills with everything you've stuffed inside and refused to face. The shadow is that locked room, and the first thing to understand is that everyone has one. The question isn't whether you have a shadow, it's whether you know what's inside it. So, where did it come from in the first place? The shadow isn't something you were born with fully formed. It was built, slowly, quietly, starting in childhood. When you were young, you learned very fast which parts of you were welcome and which were not. Maybe anger got you punished, so you learned to swallow it. Maybe needing attention made you feel like a burden, so you learned to go quiet. Maybe being loud or sensitive or different got a certain look from the adults around you, and you learned to hide that part away. None of this was a conscious choice. It was survival. A child will reject any part of themselves that threatens their connection to the people they depend on. So we take those unacceptable parts and we push them down out of sight, even out of our own awareness. But here's the thing Jung understood that most people miss. Those parts don't leave. They don't dissolve because you stopped looking at them. They go into the unconscious and they keep living there, fully intact, waiting. And this is where it gets important. The traits we bury aren't always bad ones. Sometimes we exile our confidence, our power, our ambition, our voice, because at some point showing those got us hurt or shamed. Jung called this the gold in the shadow. Some of the best parts of you may be locked in that same dark room simply because they were once inconvenient to the people around you. So now you're an adult, carrying a shadow full of everything you disowned. The problem is it doesn't stay quiet, it finds a way out, and the way it comes out has a name. Here is the single most important thing to understand about the shadow. You don't usually see it in yourself. You see it in other people. Jung described a mechanism called projection. When we can't face a trait in ourselves, the mind does something clever. It takes that trait and projects it outward onto someone else. Suddenly, the thing we can't admit about ourselves becomes the thing we can't stand about them. Jung put it bluntly. He said that everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in other people, and we treat them accordingly. So, the person who is secretly insecure calls everyone else arrogant. The person who silences their own desires becomes obsessed with judging other people's. The trait that triggers you most intensely in someone else is very often a mirror. Now, an honest and important note. This does not mean every annoyance is a hidden confession. Sometimes a rude person is just rude, and your reaction is perfectly reasonable. Projection isn't about blaming yourself for everything you dislike. The clue Jung pointed to is intensity. When your reaction to someone is way out of proportion, when a stranger's small flaw fills you with disgust or rage that doesn't quite make sense, that's the signal. That heat is often coming from inside you, not from them. This is why Jung said something that sounds almost unbelievable. That the best psychological work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow from others. Because as long as the shadow lives out there in other people, we never have to face it in here. And what we refuse to face, we are doomed to keep repeating. Which brings us to the real cost of an unexamined shadow. So what actually happens when you spend a life refusing to look in that locked room? Jung had a famous line for this. He said that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. Read that again. The parts of yourself you refuse to face don't just stay as private discomfort. They start shaping your life from the outside, as if life itself keeps handing you the same problem. You see it in patterns, the same kind of toxic relationship again and again, the same self-sabotage right when things start going well, the same conflicts with the same kinds of people in every job, in every city. It feels like bad luck, but often it's the shadow running the show from a room you won't enter. Jung described a person controlled by their unexamined shadow as someone standing in their own light, constantly tripping over themselves, living below the level they're capable of. The anger that erupts from nowhere, the jealousy you're ashamed of, the cruelty that surprises even you. These aren't signs that you're a bad person. They're signs of a part of you that has been denied for so long that the only way it can speak is by breaking through. The good news, and this is the heart of it, is that none of this is permanent. The room can be opened. Jung gave us a name for that process. It's called shadow work. Shadow work is not about getting rid of your shadow. You can't. It's a permanent part of you. The goal is the opposite, to turn toward it, to bring it into the light and to make it conscious. Jung called this integration, and he saw it as a central part of becoming a whole person. Here's what that actually looks like, in plain terms. First, notice your triggers. The next time someone fills you with a reaction that feels too big, pause. Instead of what's wrong with them, ask, why is this hitting me so hard? not to excuse them, just to look honestly at the heat and where it's really coming from. Second, get curious about what you judge. The traits you most harshly condemn in others are a map. They point toward the rooms in yourself you haven't opened. Ask, is there any version of this trait living in me that I've refused to admit? Third, stop splitting yourself into good me and bad me. The shadow grows in the dark of denial. It shrinks in the light of honesty. Simply admitting, yes, I have anger in me, I have envy in me, I have selfishness in me, without acting on it, just acknowledging it, takes away its hidden power. A word of honesty here. Real deep shadow work is not always something to do alone, and it isn't a quick social media trend. For heavy wounds, doing this with a good therapist is far safer and more effective than digging alone. The aim isn't to tear yourself open, it's to slowly, gently stop being a stranger to yourself. Because something remarkable happens when you do. The energy you spent hiding from yourself comes back to you, and that's where we end. Jung's entire body of work points toward one idea. The goal of life is not to become good, it's to become whole. A person who has met their shadow is not a perfect person. They're something rarer. Someone who is honest with themselves. They've stopped projecting their darkness onto everyone around them, so their relationships get cleaner. They've reclaimed the parts of themselves they exiled, so they have access to their full energy, their confidence, their voice. They're harder to manipulate because there's no hidden room left for someone to use against them. And maybe the most human part of all, when you accept the full, messy truth of yourself, you become far gentler with everyone else. You stop needing other people to carry your darkness for you. You recognize, as Jung put it, the shared humanity in us all, because you've finally seen your own. The thing you've been most afraid to look at inside yourself was never a monster. It was just a part of you, waiting in the dark to finally be let back in. So here's the one thing I'll leave you with. The next time someone truly gets under your skin, pause and ask yourself honestly, what is this showing me about me? You don't have to answer it today, just ask. That single question is the doorway to all of it. If this gave you a new way of seeing yourself, the next video builds directly on it. It's waiting for you on screen right now. And if you found it valuable, subscribing genuinely helps the channel keep going. I'd love to know in the comments, what trait in other people triggers you the most? Sometimes naming it is the first step to understanding it.